welcome to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I am Wendy Conquest, and I'm here today with Tim Stein, Dan Drake, and Jeanne Vitoni. And we have a special guest today. It's Stevie Hall. And Stevie has a PhD in psychology. She does sex therapy, sex addiction, betrayal trauma, complex trauma, and she also integrates Sue Johnson's emotionally focused therapy. She's located in Dallas, Texas, and she's written a book called Therapeutic Separation, a workbook for couples facing addiction. So I'm really excited to have her on today. She's done this amazing piece of work that's, I think, very helpful in our field. How are you guys feeling today?
Well, I'll just say I'm glad to have her back. Tim and I, fortunately and unfortunately, we got to interview her at the ITAP symposium. Our audio wasn't very good for talking about this. So I'm grateful that she is gracious enough to join us again to talk about this. But this is a really important issue in our field, talking about separation and therapeutic separation, how to do it safely, effectively. What do we do? How do we prepare for it? What do we do in it? How do we end it? So I'm really grateful that she's spent her time and invested in providing this resource for us. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's a lot of folks who don't know what therapeutic separation is. So I'd be interested to hear Stevie's definition of that, but that it's an option because a lot of folks get in this in the pain of do I stay, do I go? Well, there's an option of slow down, let's work on some things, let's see what's right for all of us. And for her to write up a roadmap that really helps guide people is such a great resource. So I'm interested in diving into the book, but also how Stevie came to be writing this amazing, awesome book.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dan and I had a wonderful conversation with her at I and thoroughly enjoyed that. And I'm selfishly glad that we get to have that conversation all over again. I'm also in this conversation, I'm really looking forward to really digging into one of the things I think is really unique in her book, which is the middle section about when you're separated, what do you each individually work on and how do you use that to sort of guide what direction you're going with your therapeutic separation. That's a unique aspect that I haven't seen formally organized like this before. And I look forward to exploring that with her a little bit.
Right.
Welcome, Stevie.
Hello,
Thank
Stevie.
you. Good to see you all.
Yeah. So first of all, can we talk about, for those in the audience that don't know, what is therapeutic separation? How would you define it?
Sure. So therapeutic separation we define as an intentional separation that is structured and taken during a certain period of time. So we typically recommend about 90 days. That's just in general. It doesn't fit for every relationship. But the most important part is that it's intentional and that it's very structured. What we see in research, and I'm sure each of you have had this experience, is that ambiguous separations don't really help. They often cause more harm for the couple, for the family, and just a lot of confusion. A therapeutic separation is very different than that. It's structured, there's a lot of planning around the separation, what it will look like, what are the different boundaries, what does communication look like, how do we know that we want to move back towards integration, reintegration, how do we know that we maybe need to move into either more separation or a permanent separation. And so it is very different than some of the ambiguous separations that we tend to see.
Also, I think as for people that are hearing this for the first time, therapeutic separation. So when a couple finds out that there's sex addiction that's been happening, what I find is they tend to seek out a marriage therapist or a couples therapist first. And then eventually, if it's like, okay, if this is addiction, we need specialized people for this. When do you think is a good time or not a good time to separate?
Oh, that's a great question. And I wish there was just a canned statement I can give you for that. But it really depends on the relationship and what's happening. And so I believe it's in the first chapter of our workbook. We talk about what are some of the things that you might be seeing in your relationship that would indicate a separation would be helpful. And so some of that is continuous lying, gaslighting, a manipulation, if there's chronic relapses happening, of course, if there's physical violence, anything of that nature. And I believe what we have are some quizzes in the book that the reader can go through and look at and check off how many they have and sort of create a tally, which would give them a sense of, is the separation helpful? And then there's different types of separation. So what sort of separation would work for our relationship? But I would say for a reader or a person does not have the book, then really assessing how safe is this relationship? And is my nervous system just completely hijacked every day because of the lying, gaslighting, relapse, whatever might be happening? And I have some couples, even not in the addiction healing process, that just have such a negative relationship cycle. It's very toxic, it's very hurtful. And in those relationships as well, sometimes we recommend a therapeutic separation.
Yeah, I like you have that questions for each: therapeutic separation, controlled separation, permanent separation, legal separation. I haven't seen one break it down like that before. So I think just being able to, and then where are we, what's going to be right for us. So I'm looking at it right now. There's questions that literally show you, help you can answer to see if this is going to be right. I think that's actually really helpful to determine, because a lot of people are pretty lost at that point. I've seen a lot of my couples, it feels it's intense or volatile or scary, or every day can feel so different. So having a resource that shows what actually where we're at and what's helpful for us, I think is really helpful.
I like that there are a
Yes.
couple of different varieties so people can really like what's right for us and what is a best match for us, and that you provide a description, because I know that clients that I have that are struggling with this, is that right for us? And when I remind them therapeutic separation is all the work you do during the separation, a lot of folks
Yes.
don't know this exists. So you have used it with folks outside of addiction and betrayal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
It can be
Absolutely.
very helpful for all kinds of couples.
It really can be. And of course, the book is more focused on relationships that have addiction healing process in them, because that's primarily what Lindsay and I work with. But really, it could be useful in many relationships that might need that intentional, structured separation. And to the point that you're making, every relationship is different because every family system is different too. And so we have some couples that a physical separation, which we call a therapeutic separation in the book, is really what is needed and what's going to create the most space and safety and healing. And then there are some relationships where it's just not feasible for one reason or another for there to be a physical separation. They can't have two households, the kids are too young, whatever the reason might be. And so then in that case, we would still recommend a sense of a separation. It's called a controlled separation. That's more of a psychological separation. And we still try to create as much separation as we can in that regard too. And then of course, there are different other types of separations that one might take if it were legal separation, permanent separation, that sort of thing. But really, mostly what we see is the full therapeutic separation, where there's that physical separation, or the controlled separation, which tends to happen within the home.
So as therapists, we're very aware, especially in this field, of therapeutic separations and the benefits of it and why we would recommend a couple might do that. If there are people out there that are listening that are like many of our clients when this comes up and they're like, I don't want to do that, that terrifies me.
Mhm.
What would you say to them that the potential benefits of a therapeutic separation are if that is something that somebody's recommending for them?
That's a great question. And I would say that comes up a lot when we talk about therapeutic separation, the fear of what does that mean? Is it a step towards divorce? What happens if my partner acts out during that time? I mean, the idea of more separation, especially in a relationship where maybe we're already not feeling connected, can feel overwhelming. And so the biggest benefit I see and that I hear from the clients I work with is the clarity that they gain during that time. Because when you are caught in the midst of the relationship cycle and it's not a healthy one, it is really hard to be able to take a step back and ask yourself, is this healthy? Is this okay? What could be different? What do we need to change? Because every day you're just surviving through the cycle and through the chaos. And so by taking a break from that cycle, what it allows you to do is to have a little bit of clarity around what's happening, what's contributing, what are the things that need to change, how do we create safety? And what I would say for a lot of betrayed partners is that it really helps them typically feel empowered, because now they have the space where they're not just triggered every single moment of every day. And they have that space to settle into their body a little bit and really assess, what is it do I need and how do I empower myself? And I would say for the person in recovery, it also gives them space where, for many of our clients, they're trying really hard. And even if they're trying really hard, they're still maybe triggering their partner. And so it gives a little bit of space there too, where they are able to focus in on some of their recovery work and make the shifts that they need to make in the relationship.
You mentioned before, I think it's so important. You mentioned the structured nature of this. Can you help people understand what makes this, like, how do you help people structure it so that it is safe and structured?
Yeah. So when we say structured, I'm glad you brought it up because it really is structured. We go through a list of different points that need to be considered. And of course, we try to include anything else that might be relevant to the couple. But typically, we start with what is the time length that we're looking at here? What's going to be feasible? And for a lot of couples, they start with 90 days, right? And from there, we look at, well, what is the intention of taking this separation? Because if we're going to do this really hard thing, why are we doing it? And what are you hoping to really get out of this? And we make that clear in the process. From there, we look at finances. How will finances be handled during those 90 days, including bills that might need to be paid or purchases or emergencies that might come up. We look at childcare, pet care, communication boundaries. Are we texting during this time? Are we meeting up to talk during this time? Are we hugging? Are we hand holding? Are we kissing? Is there sex? All of these different components of a relationship that come up. We also look at holidays. Unfortunately, I have some couples that are going through separation during the holidays. So we're creating specific plans for those days, if there's birthdays, if there's family events, if they go to church together. All of these different pieces sort of come up in the separation process. And if you have clients who are in a therapeutic process, what I find is really helpful is for each partner to work on their list themselves. And then if I am helping with the separation, I ask that they send it to me. And then I create kind of one contract or agreement. And then we spend about an hour and a half or 2 hours going over that. So by the time we have a completed separation agreement, there's probably about, I'd say, 3 or 4 hours of work that's been put into that document. And where it's really meant to be that intentional piece there, right? If someone is not in a therapeutic process, I would still recommend that they take the time to go through that whole list to create something structured and come together, hopefully with a third party, a sponsor, a church leader, a very trusted friend, maybe, that can hold that space for them to work through it.
To clarify, you have each member of the relationship do their work and send it to you, and then you look for the commonalities or look for the rub points and then talk about those in a session following?
Yes. So not every couple does it that way, right? Because there's not always two individual therapists and a couples therapist. That is my preferred method, just because I find it is the smoothest and most collaborative way that we can do it is if I'm the receiving person for the separation agreement, and then I present this document neutrally as what I think would be best given what each person has outlined. And I'll say the majority of the time, their documents are pretty aligned. It just really helps for me to present something. If there's two individual therapists working it, then it would be for each client to share it with their individual therapist to work through it. And then for those two individual therapists to collaborate. And if they could do a session together, that's great, where they walk through really just putting pen to paper and making that agreement more black and white for the couple.
I liked how you talk about specific goals. I was looking back through here too, because I have some situations where people are very vague, very aspirational or intention. And I think there's something, okay, if it's 90 days, that feels like a long time, but that comes quick. And I
It
just,
does.
what by 90 days, what am I going to do? Not just these grand goals for myself. I'm going to do this, all this self-actualization or realization work. You'll do some of that, but I think just really being realistic about as clear and specific as we can possibly get. Otherwise, I've run into some issues where we've got these great intentions, but now how do we know when we've actually gotten there? So maybe that's your job as the couples support, the couples therapist to like, okay, getting concrete, what does this look like? And try to match this up so people have realistic expectations of this too, not just some kind of vague or
Yes.
aspirational intent.
Yes, and that's a great point because it's great to have aspirations, but we really have 90 days. And because it's intentional, we want to be able to communicate to our partner. This is what I'm really hoping to be able to present, so to speak, at the end, whether that is sobriety or more regulation or working on specific things and really trying to make that as tangible as possible. So not just I'm going to work on resentments. It's I'm really going to address the resentments that I have with my mother or my father or this specific pain point with the therapist. And that just helps each person know what is it that you're going to be doing during this time. And That's really why, Tim, you mentioned chapter 6, where the individual work is. I really like that chapter for many reasons. One, because I think the individual work is one of the more empowering pieces that brings clarity, but also both partners are working on the same thing. So there really isn't this question of, well, what are you doing during separation? It's, well, we're both doing chapter 6, and we both should be coming to our check-ins with the couples therapist or individual therapist with some of that completed. And so that is also a structured piece of the separation, is that they're working on their normal stuff in their individual therapy, but hopefully also addressing some of these things that we expect would give them clarity of the relationship and just clarity for themselves.
That's
And
so
That's
interesting because I would think that could be diagnostic all in itself. So if one person is coming to the couple session and they've already done their homework assignment and the other person says, "Oh, I didn't get to it." Wow, that's quite a statement.
which I've
Mm-hmm.
seen, Wendy. I've seen that play out. And oftentimes, in my experience, it's the betrayed partner that does their work and the betrayer does not. It's been my
right,
Mm-hmm.
experience.
right.
Absolutely. And as sad and disappointing as that is, what I typically tell the person who's done the work is that's information that you need for clarity,
Right.
right? You don't have to add a judgment to it. You don't have to make a decision off of it, but it is just something you add to your box of information where you notice that.
Can I ask a question on that, Stevie? And I would say I haven't seen that before anywhere in the resources. And I think I remember that conversation we had at ITAP. There's some really good resources. I've used some resources about how to structure a separation. I've never seen anything that helps. Okay, now what? Now maybe it's general guideposts or what are some, but like now what are the things we're working on? I think that is really unique of having some really structured activities that people can be doing during the separation so people don't feel like they're floundering or just aimless. I really like that. I'm curious in that chapter, there is a push, or at least there's some exploration of family of origin wounding and dynamics. I'm curious for the betrayed partner, let's say we're in safety stabilization phase of healing, and we're just not quite there with a betrayed partner. We're just trying to heal from the rupture of betrayal, and they're not ready to go to any family of origin dynamics. How do you handle that? Let's say we're all trying to work on the same thing, but we're not quite there yet because we have this huge
Mm-hmm.
rupture still that's kind of hemorrhaging.
And that does happen, right? For many different reasons, because when we're taking a separation, it could be really at any point in the healing process, it might happen, right? I've had clients need to do it before disclosure, post disclosure, sometimes 2 years into recovery. It just sort of depends on where they're at. And so, what Lindsay likes to say that I really appreciate is take what you need and leave the rest. And
Wow.
so, especially if you're working with your individual therapist, they're really going to be able to guide you. So, if you're at a place in that work and you're looking at the workbook and just going, I can't do this right now, or I'm just not there, that's okay. Just make a note of it and move on to the next thing that might be helpful, right? Our hope was to put a lot of resources in the book to create some of that guidance and structure, but we also know that not everything will be relevant or maybe even be useful at that point in time.
So you're saying use what's right for you in that time. You can always circle back later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's
Yes.
not a
Mm-hmm.
directive to do family of origin or growing up experiences if you're in that safety stabilization, I just got hit by a bus kind of place. Okay.
Yes.
I was curious about, because you're saying that both members are they're really answering similar questions or the same questions. Tell me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about having them do the same work and coming back and checking in, or them having their individual objectives and needs, things that they need to get into while they're separated, which could be different and
Mm-hmm.
coming back. So tell me, I'm curious of your thoughts about the doing the same.
Sure. So typically in a separation, and it really again depends on the dynamics of the couple, we're not typically doing couples work, right? We're trying to create safety and stabilization. So if we're starting to get into some of the pains and wounds and the things that I think we all agree need to be addressed and healed during separation, it's not necessarily helpful. I have had some couples that after maybe the first 30 days, 60 days, we are able to do that because there's enough stabilization in the relationship. But if we're taking a separation, that's typically a clue to me that there's not enough stabilization or safety to get into that work. And just because of the work I do with EFT and attachment, I would not want to risk that for any person to get into attachment wounds when we don't have basic safety. So typically we make it very clear that therapeutic separation is not a time for couples therapy, but that we do these check-in points. And that can be every 2 weeks, that can be once a month, just sort of depends on the couple. But typically what I'm doing in the check-in points is what needs to be shifted or changed in the agreement, what's working, what's not working. I have some couples that are making progress and it's clear that reintegration is probably on the table. So we might adjust the agreement a little bit to fit that. Maybe in the first 30 days, 60 days, they weren't open to going on dates. But now in the last part of the separation, they're open to meeting once a week and trying to do a healthy communication date, right? Not necessarily something tremendously romantic, but just can we have dinner and have our nervous systems around each other and be okay? The individual work, the reason why we wanted it to be similar is one, so each partner knew what the other was working on. But also, there are some pieces in there that I think really give insight into the other person's story and experience that maybe it's good to have that contrast to really see them in a different light or to see the similarities. And so, an example that comes to mind is at some point in chapter 6, we're looking at the relationship cycle and how both couples interact with each other. And we're looking at the different fears of connection, attachment injuries, core beliefs, and some of these other pieces that contribute to the triggers in a relationship. So by having both individuals map out how they show up in that cycle, it helps them to be able to come back together to really look at what wasn't working so that when we get to couples therapy, we're able to do that. There are times things come up that we have to address, right? Sometimes it's family stuff that comes up. It might be a violation of the boundaries. In that case, we're addressing those things, right? And like I said, if couples therapy is possible, then we're definitely getting into some of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You have at the end of the book, you talk about the different potential outcomes. Can you talk about sort of that chapter and sort of the process for couples as they're coming to the end of a therapeutic separation and sort of figuring out, well, where do we go from here? What's the next step?
So I think it's really important to be assessing where the couple is at throughout the process. If you're taking a 90-day separation, you don't want to wait until day 89 to decide what are we going to do. But I would say there's really three avenues that I typically see. One is they want to reintegrate and move towards coming back into the home or having less of a separation in the relationship. There might be a request to extend the separation. Maybe we did 90 days, but we realized there's just a few more things we want to work out before we come back together. Or there's clarity about having permanent separation, right? And I would say in any case, my hope is that the client has been communicating with their individual therapist about where they're at, right? And through working through the workbook and doing their own process, the hope is that's becoming clear. And if it's not, then it might be recommended to just extend that separation a little bit. And I have some couples that extend it by 2 weeks, some that want another month, 3 months. I've had couples extend it 6 months. It just sort of depends where they're at in the process. But the hope is that you're reaching a little bit of clarity, at least about where you find yourself leaning towards. And then I would say, especially with reintegration, I tell my couples a lot, we don't go from fully separated on day 89 to you are back in the bed and we're cuddling on day 91. But it's just, that's too much. So if we know we're moving towards reintegration, then what I prefer to do is to start adding in small steps for reintegration, right? So that might mean spending more time at the house, right? Having home visits where the person who's not staying at the home and has moved out is maybe coming over for dinner twice a week, right? Maybe it's that there's an overnight stay of 1 day, of 2 days, and then gradually that moves up to staying 3 days during the week, 4 days, and we're working our way back to kind of full-time living. If a couple goes from fully separated to now they're fully back together, usually they're going to trigger each other quite a bit, right? Because you haven't worked out all the kinks. Like in theory, we've done all this work outside of each other and we hope to come back together. But it's almost like listening to an old song, but you have new dance moves. So when the old song comes on, that muscle memory kind of comes into play and you really want to move this way, but you're supposed to move that way. And so couples tend to step on toes and bump elbows, so to speak. And so the hope is if we're doing a slow integration, we're working out those kinks along the way and really being able to readjust and keep that safety and stabilization. In a controlled separation, it would be very similar. It's just that we would be spending a little more time maybe in common areas. we might ask for them to do certain things together, whether that's like grocery shop together or watch TV together or go to church together if they're not already doing that, just to create some more kind of time together and getting used to one another again.
I'm glad you bring up that part is very flexible, because some people have asked me, well, what happens on day 91? She moves in, he moves in? No. And which, like you said, it's like you're talking about it and assessing it along the way. Nothing's a surprise come day 91, for example. And then I love the fact that you're articulating in your book those options and how the transition can occur. It really offers people a lot of guidance. And I think when things are really tricky and hard and painful, having some guidance to say, is that right for me? It's such a good resource. Thank you.
And that was really our hope with that, because I think we've all had those experiences guiding couples through this, and just or individuals, and knowing how difficult it is and how scary it is. And for some of the resources we really had, it was a bit confusing how to navigate this process and how a couple would navigate this process. And we're asking them to do this really big, scary thing, and there's not really a safety net there. And so the book has a lot of information in it. And one of the reasons why it has a lot is because we wanted it to be supportive in sort of every step they're taking. And I would say, along with that, if they're working with a therapist, the hope is that the therapist can be flexible and adaptable, right? Because there's just things that come up. I've worked with couples where it was clear that reintegration was on the table. We talked about reintegration and the partner just froze. I mean, went full into hypoarousal. That was a pretty clear indication that maybe we're not so ready for reintegration, right? And had we ignored that sign, it could have been really unhelpful for them. But by being flexible and saying, okay, we don't have to get right back into reintegration, we have options, I think that really helped the couple move in the direction they needed to.
That was a question I had, Stevie, is if a couple is going to buy the book, can they do the chapters on their own, right? Like, so do they have to have a therapist to start this process?
They don't have to have a therapist. Of course, in the ideal scenario, there would be two individual therapists and a couples therapist, or at least two individual therapists. But we understand that's just not the case for everyone. So we did write the book where it could be used outside of the therapeutic process, and we still try to keep it very therapeutic. We do recommend that a lot of the reflection exercises are processed with a third party. So, we say a therapist or a sponsor or a leader that you trust. Like, it might be someone in the church, it might be someone in another group that you're in. Some people are in leadership groups, but just being able to have someone who can be a mirror to you in that process is helpful. So it's definitely possible to do it. I would say in that case, if someone is not in a therapeutic process, the boundaries need to be very clear for everyone. We don't want to get into doing boundaries halfway, because that creates ambiguity, and then we're just going to an ambiguous separation.
And Stevie, where can they get the book?
So you can buy it online. You can buy it through Gentle Path, who published the book. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it from Barnes and Noble. I'm sure there are some other book places, but those are the ones I know the most.
That's great. And this may be a strange question, but if they have questions about the book and they don't have a therapist, is there a way that they can consult with you or reach out to you? Do you do that?
Yes, absolutely. Lindsay and I have both had people reach out to us. So my direct email is Stevie, Stevie, at arisedallas.com. Lindsay's is Lindsay at pecancounseling.com. And then we have a website called therapeutic.separations.com where you can get information about the book. You can also contact us there. And so that would be a third option. And usually when someone reaches out, one of us is able to connect them with a resource or information, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
And if people are looking for the book, what is the exact title?
Therapeutic Separation. And then the subtitle is A Workbook for Couples Facing
Addiction. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. We changed the subtitle right before publishing. So before, I think it was like a guide for couples. And so I always forget which one it is. Is it a workbook or a guide?
It definitely is a workbook. Yeah.
As we're getting closer to wrapping up, I was curious, as you've gotten a chance to implement this more with couples, is there anything that you're finding, like any kind of wisdom for those out there that you're finding from the couples you're working with that's been helpful and supportive in the workbook, or surprises for you?
Yes, I would say because the therapeutic separation is so structured, it's really meant to create safety and it's meant to be collaborative. Both partners come together to create it. But what I see sometimes is that the therapeutic separation might be used in a hostile way and in a very rigid way. And that can be really harmful because it's not meant to be used in that way. We do want to keep boundaries. And I recommend that to my couples a lot. Go back to the agreement, stay with the boundaries until we revisit them and you need to change them. But if you're trying to change them on the fly, you're trying to do something new, that is not going to be helpful. We're creating ambiguity. And so I would say, even though there's a lot of structure here, it's really meant to be a collaborative process. It's meant to create a healing space for both partners to accomplish what they hope to accomplish. It's not meant to be like a principle or an authority. It's not meant to oppress anyone or make the process harder. It's meant to be safe. So I always encourage couples to honor what they've created and to allow it to create that space. But sometimes I do see that couples can get into using it like a weapon between them, and that is just very unhelpful.
Well, Stevie, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and everyone, this is Conversations on Sex Addiction and Relationships. If you like this episode and you're not following us, please follow us and give us a thumbs up, hopefully. If it's appropriate to share this episode with other people that you think might benefit, please do. We also do a mailbag, which is we take questions or comments that you, our listeners, submit, and then we do episodes on those. So you can email us at conversations.sar@gmail.com, and then we will try to help you or support you with whatever you've got going on. So thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you, Stevie.
Thanks, Stevie.
Stevie.
Thanks so much.